Welcome everyone to the Pure Storage presentation, Introduction to the Pure Storage PowerShell SDK version 2. My name is Mike Nelson. I'm a solutions architect on the Microsoft Solutions team, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP. During this video, I'll be walking through the new highlights of the version 2 of the SDK, along with showing practical demo examples of how you can use it in your environment. So let's get started. Before we get to the demonstrations, I'd like to show you how to actually access the download for the SDK version 2 and the documentation, as well as the different sites that it's located on. So if you were to go to support.purestorage.com, you can click on the solutions icon. This brings up all the different solutions we have, and we're specifically looking at the Microsoft Platform Guide. Once inside the Platform Guide that contains all information around Pure and Microsoft integrations, you'll see the new integrations with the PowerShell SDK version 2.2. Now this may move down the list as we start rolling out new integrations, so you can just scroll down and go to Windows PowerShell, click on that, and now you have all the documentation for the Windows PowerShell modules. Once in here, you can actually see there are two documents, one called the Install PowerShell SDK using the Microsoft Installer Package, or MSI, and then the Installing the PowerShell SDK using the PowerShell Gallery. Now, we do offer the PowerShell SDK as an MSI, mainly for the reason of having it for people that cannot connect to the internet and download it from the PowerShell Gallery. So it's a standalone installation that you could use at like a dark site or just about any other place that you could not get internet access. Installing it from the PowerShell Gallery is the preferred method, and the reason for that is because updating from the PowerShell Gallery is much easier than having to re-download an MSI, go through the installation, and update it that way. So when you actually click on those links, they will bring you to one of two places. The first one is the GitHub repository where the PowerShell MSI installer is. We also have a downloadable help file that might be interest of you. And second, we also have some examples. This examples file actually contains a PowerShell PS1 file with a bunch of practical examples that you can use in your daily work. Now this file will be always updated on a consistent basis with new commands and scripts as they become available. Next, you would also take a look at the PowerShell Gallery. The PowerShell Gallery is a repository for many PowerShell modules. And the PowerShell version 1 of the SDK was housed on the PowerShell Gallery as well. We have a separate repository for the PowerShell SDK version 2. The reason being that the PowerShell Gallery doesn't allow for multiple versions in the same repository, so we created a new one. So just so you're aware that when you go to download from the PowerShell Gallery, you want to make sure you specify the number 2 afterwards. So from here, we'll go into the demonstrations. One of the highlights of the Pure Storage PowerShell SDK version 2 release is the ability to run it in a multi-platform scenario. So with PowerShell version 7 and above, you are able to run that inside of Microsoft Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and a few other operating systems. With the PowerShell SDK version 2, we have tested it with Microsoft Windows, certain flavors of Linux, and the Mac OS. So what I'm going to show here is the ability to do that cross-platform. Now I've got Windows Terminal loaded here, which is giving me a window not only into my Microsoft Windows environment, it also allows me to get a window into what they call the Windows Subsystem for Linux, or WSL. WSL allows me to run different Linux distributions on Windows and be able to interact with them between Windows and Linux. So I'm starting out with PowerShell 5.1, and I've done a PS version table just to show that there's no smoke and mirrors in the background. PowerShell 7 is also loaded in another tab, And then I have Ubuntu 18.04 loaded. So what I'm going to do now is actually run the PowerShell instance on the Ubuntu box. Now, the Ubuntu operating system requires that you do the installation of PowerShell, and there are instructions in the guide for Mac and Linux OS on our support website to do that. So if we go ahead and just start PowerShell, 7.0.3 comes up, and all I want to do is, again, following the instructions in the installing the module from the PowerShell gallery, I'm just doing an install module. And that install module is going out to the PowerShell gallery saying, I'd like to retrieve this and install it. Now what you see here is a notice about having an untrusted repository. You may or may not get this message depending on how your PowerShell session is configured. If you get this message, all you simply need to do is type Y and enter. It'll go through, install the package, which was very quick, and now I'm ready to go ahead and execute. I'm going to actually have to do an import module first to let PowerShell be able to interact with the module and the commandlets. And then from there I'm going to connect to an array. So when you connect to an array, you have several different options, and we have another document on our support website that outlines all of the options that are available for connecting to arrays. One of them is just a simple credential, and this is only valid with the API version 2.2 and above. If you have a API version 2.0 or 2.1 on your array but not 2.2, you cannot use this connection string. So what we're doing here is we're setting a variable for array 2 and doing a connect PFA to array to my endpoint on my local network, asking for credentials and ignoring the self-signed certificate. So now I'm connected to the array, and I can validate that by issuing an SDK version 2 command, such as get pf2 array. And this gives me all the details of my test array. So you can see that doing this in Linux is going to be much like what you're going to see when I switch over to Windows. So now that I'm in PowerShell 5.1, we have a definitive advantage of using this version of PowerShell. And this is another highlight of the SDK version 2. What it does is it allows us to be able to run both SDK version 1 and SDK version 2 in the same PowerShell session. Otherwise, if you're using PowerShell version 7 or above, you must run them in separate sessions. And the reason behind that is that the SDK version 1 is based off of the .NET framework, while SDK version 2, is based off of .NET Core. So in PowerShell 5.1, which is still made available by Microsoft even on the latest operating systems, you are able to actually import both modules and execute against multiple arrays using either SDK version 1 or SDK version 2. If you're using PowerShell 7, you can only currently use SDK version 2. So once I'm actually in the 5.1, I'm going to do a get module here, and it's going to show you that I currently don't have any pure modules loaded inside of this session. And I'm going to go ahead and import them. First of all, I'm going to import the version 1 of the SDK. Secondly, I'm going to import the version 2 of the SDK. Now I have them both loaded. And if I do another get module, you can see I have both loaded, SDK and SDK2. Once those are loaded, I can do a get command and the SDK2, and it's just going to scroll all the commands, right? One of the things I wanted to point out here by doing this is the next step, which I'm going to go through and actually count how many commandlets there are. Now, if you look at version 1, there's 441 commandlets. If I look at version 2, there's only 200 commandlets. If you were to look at these side by side, there's one definitive difference that you would see, and that is we have eliminated plurals. What plurals are basically commands that are plural. And by doing that, we've combined the commandlets into single commandlets, thereby reducing the total number. We've also combined parameters and consolidated them and made commands more versatile to cover the ability to run against multiple API calls. All of this was done to consolidate the number, but also get into more of a best practices going forward and staying in parity with the API. One of the important features of PowerShell is the help function. And we have taken strides in improving the help with the PowerShell SDK. So if we were to do a help command here, as you can see, I'm just doing a get help on the get PFA2 array commandlet with a full parameter, which will give me all of the help that's available. And I'm piping it to the more command, which just paginates the output. So if we take a look at that, it gives you all the information that you need about the commandlet, and at the bottom it also gives you information on examples. Now, I did want to point out here one of the new features of the SDK version 2, and that is we've added a parameter called API version. And what that does is that allows you to target a commandlet against a specific API version if for some reason you needed to use the functionality or features of an API version that are either no longer available in the newer versions of the API, or they've been consolidated or they've been moved. So this allows you to go ahead and say I want to run this commandlet against a specific API version. Now some folks will ask, how do I know what API versions are available on my array? And that is available in our support documentation, but you can also go directly to the array, and I'll switch over to my browser here. You can also go directly over to the array, and when you're at the array you can type in a specific URL and it will tell you all of the API versions that are available. This is the URL right here, so it's the IP address or FQDN of your array /API/API_version, and this will list out all the API versions that are currently available in the Purity version, operating version, system version on your array. Getting back to the PowerShell now. Next I'll be actually using a command that I think is really underused in the PowerShell community, especially when folks are just trying to learn PowerShell and folks that are newer to PowerShell and they're administering their arrays, and that is something called the show command. The show command will bring up an actual UI for a commandlet. So I'm going to issue a show command for the get PFA2 array, and you'll see a UI pops up that gives you all the different parameters that are available. Now these are the parameters that we actually have, and then there are things called the common parameters, which are parameters that are given by the PowerShell framework itself, .NET Core framework. This gives you more of a visual representation of the commandlet, and I believe it helps folks understand how to use PowerShell a little bit easier. You can even do a run directly from here after you put in your parameters, or you can copy it and paste it in. All right, from there I'm actually going to do the connection to the array now, and I'm going to connect, but I'm going to connect with two different connections. And the reason I'm doing that is that I'm going to connect to an array with the SDK version 1, and then I'm going to connect the SDK version 2 to the same array. And what that does is it allows me to use commandlets from both SDK version 1 and SDK version 2 against a single array. Now you can connect to multiple arrays between SDK 1 and 2 as long as you're still in that PowerShell 5.1 session. So I'm going to connect first, and what it's doing here is it's actually just giving it a new PF array, which is an SDK1 command. It's asking for credentials and it's ignoring the self-signed certificate. So I'm going to enter the credentials, and now I'm connected to that array, and I can show that SDK1 command, and you can see that I'm connected to that test array. For version 2, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Now you can use the same connection. Okay, we have multiple methods of connecting with version 2, and that's all outlined in the documentation on our support site. But I'm going to connect with something called OAuth. OAuth is another feature of the SDK version 2, and what it does is it provides enhanced token security for connecting to an array. And what I've done is I've taken all the commands that are required and I put them into a function. And the reason I put it into a function is I can, functions in PowerShell are portable. They have ability to be used in multiple scripts, be called from just about anywhere, and you don't have to keep on re-entering the same code over and over again. So I'm going to put the function here in the window. First, I'm going to clear the screen here so you can get a better look at this. This is the actual function, and all it's doing really is calling the new PFA2 array command, and it's putting in all the variables that I predefined. Besides that, it's just writing out what it's actually doing. I'm doing this for visual purposes. So I'm going to execute the function here, and as you can see, it's going to return to me the data that the OAuth will be using. It's client ID, the key ID, and the private key. From there, we're just going to, again, use a connect PFA2 array. In order to connect to an array through the SDK2, you must use the connect PFA2 array command. And this is the completion of the OAuth token exchange that's going to happen right here. So this commandlet that I've just executed established the actual connection, created all the authentication that was required for OAuth, and now I'm connected to the array. And I can again prove that by doing a connect PFA2 array, and you can see my array listed there. So currently I am connected both with SDK version 1 and SDK version 2. Another feature I want to show you is something we call logging. If you do a command today in PowerShell, such as this command, which is the get PF2 array, and I do a verbose, it will give you, all of the background information that's going on when you execute a commandlet. But there's really no way to log that for an entire session unless you use native PowerShell commands. So what we've done is we've created our own commandlet for that, and that is called set PFA2 logging. So I'm going to issue that command, and it only takes one parameter, and that is a log file name. So it's going to create a log file called session.log in the current directory. And what it's going to do is every time that a command is executed inside of this session, it will log it to that file. But you have to understand that it's only going to log the SDK version 2 commands. It's not going to log the SDK version 1s because it's only compatible with the SDK version 2. If you need to log the SDK version 1 commandlets, you can use a native PowerShell command. So in order to view this log, just to finish off the highlight of this feature, I'm going to open the PowerShell 7 window here, and I'm going to use a native PowerShell command called get content. And get content basically goes through and takes the contents of a file and tells you, everything that happened inside of that file. So I'm actually taking the session.log and I'm doing a wait. And what that does is that takes that log file and it'll sit here and wait for input. I'll go through and it will show you in real time what's being written to that log. So if I were to go back over here and I were to issue another get PFA2 array command, such as that, when I go back here, you're going to see the results of that command that I just ran. So this is really kind of good if you're troubleshooting or debugging a session that you're in, you want to know exactly what was sent to the array and how it was talked to the API. That is the feature set that I wanted to show you in the introduction to the PowerShell SDK version 2. I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and please join our Slack team at the codeinvite.purestorage.com, which will give you an invitation to join the Slack team that talks about APIs, SDKs, and coding. Everything API for Pure is located at code.purestorage.com, and of course all of our articles and tech notes are available at support.purestorage.com.